you here in the room and those online on our journey today, where we look at Cape Verde, a small group of islands 500 kilometers outside the west tip of Africa. We'll look at their journey to building resilience. So welcome with me here on the panel. I'll present my invitees of today. So to my left, Julio Rodriguez, administrator at National Institute for Public Health. To my right, Esther de Brito. She's executive administrator of the board of directors at the National Institute of Meteorology and Geophysics at Cape Verde. She is also permanent representative of Cape Verde at the WMO. Before that, she was also GCF focal point, and she coordinated some of the work of the NAPA and National Communications. So welcome to have you on board. Alexander Nevsky Rodriguez. I hope you can hear me better. I have to put the microphone very close. So you are Director of the Cabinet and Special Advisor to the Minister of Agriculture and Environment. Your sectors of specialties: environment, water and climate. You are an environmental engineer by training and have a long track record in various areas in Cape Verde, in the water sector, national park administrator, and you are also author of many scientific articles and books. So welcome to have you here. And you recently contributed to the NAP and the NDC. Carla Semedo, welcome. You are heading the Resource Mobilization Unit at the National Directorate of Planning at the Ministry of Finance, and you have managed various projects in the past. You are very new to your current position, but you have a long experience in Cape Verde on managing international projects. You hold a Master in Development and International Cooperations, so welcome. Dr. Andre Weidenhaupt from the Ministry of Environment and Climate and Sustainable Development in Luxembourg. You are Director General of the Department of Environment. You hold a PhD in chemistry, and you work on different aspects of environment and the human interactions, also environmental impacts, pollution, and you cover also all the international affairs, European and international level, including budget management. Before, you were also director at the Luxembourg Water Management Agency. Next to you, Rito Evroy, National Director of Industry, Trade and Energy at the ministry, which has the same name. You have a very long track record in energy. You worked on policy, regulatory and institutional arrangements, and you followed very closely the sector reforms in energy. Welcome to have you on board. Next to you, Ines Murao. You hold a Master in Environmental Engineering. You have worked long time as an international consultant on low carbon and resilient development. You had your own consultancy. We are happy to have you on board. You worked for very numerous clients like UNDP, World Bank, European Commission, GIZ, now LuxDev. You are an advisor also to the UNFCCC. You worked in so many countries that I won't spell them all now, and your focus on climate policy, and recently you also supported the NAP and the NDC in Cape Verde. So welcome all of you. We will take you to a short journey of Cape Verde's way to resilience. Maybe I will start with Esther Brito. We've seen over the last years cascading crises from food crisis, from economic crisis, biodiversity, to that point that now at an energy crisis, almost the climate crisis seems like not forgotten, but it seems sometimes far away. We have heard a couple of years ago very dramatic scenarios which tell us about impacts. What can you tell us about these scenarios, about climate data and climate facts? Were the scenarios that worse than they were predicted? And do you see already some impacts on Cape Verde?
Thank you so much. Good morning to everybody. I first will just let you know how our climate behavior in the last years in Cape Verde. And as you know, Cape Verde has a dry subtropical climate and have also just two seasons, dry and wet season. And the small season is the wet season that is marked by irregular precipitation. The precipitation in Cape Verde is about, in average, 150 to 300 millimeter a year. And the average annual temperature varies between 23 to 25 degrees. Sometimes we have the minimum temperature from 15 to 18 degrees, and maximum can rise 34 degrees. And the most frequent meteorological and climate extreme events recorded in Cape Verde are droughts that have a periodic character. And the last years we are observing the episodes of sustained drought from Sahara, so called in Cape Verde as bruma seca, and have intensified both in terms of number of days and intensity. The other extreme weather events that are generally observed in the rainy period, like heavy rains with strong winds, and in recent years some weather systems have developed into tropical depression, and the most recent recorded in Cape Verde in 2015 category 1 hurricane, in this time called Hurricane Fred. From the result of the trend analysis in temperature and precipitation, we have some results. From the period 1917 to 2020, that show that the average annual temperature has increased about 1 degree. And we also observed an increase in the heat waves episodes in the recent years. On the precipitation, the annual rainfall in Cape Verde does not show a well-defined trend. This is consistent with the models, and the models also not indicate relevant trends in precipitation. On the extreme weather and climate events, the rainfall events with potential flooding increased between the two baseline we observed from 1961 to 1990, and also from 1991 to 2020. In the most seasons we are observed that. But we can highlight for 2015 and 2020 floods observed in prior. In the middle of this extreme rain events, in recent decades we have the extreme droughts, for example from 2017, 2018, that was a very high impact in our economy. But we have drought events in Cape Verde, and we observed that is periodically, and we can say it's part of our historical reality. And we, Cape Verdean, remain vulnerable to them.
Thank you. That is, I think, hard climatic or scientific facts that you provided us. Alexander Nevsky, adding to that maybe the human and the social dimension to what we just heard, to what extent would you estimate the vulnerability of Cape Verdeans? Where does Cape Verde stand? What are maybe the sectors most impacted and vulnerable to those climate facts that we just heard? I'm curious.
Okay, thank you, and good morning for everyone. First of all, we would like to thank the IEB and the Benelux Pavilion to give us this opportunity to present our side event here. And this acknowledgement is extended to Luxembourg, to government of Luxembourg, and to the LuxDev, who are helping us to improve our climate governance. So, Cabo Verde is a small island state highly affected by climate change and other natural hazards. The World Risk Report 2020 ranked Cabo Verde in 11th position in the global context in terms of disaster risks, and in the African continent it was placed in the first position, thus represent the country with the highest risk index in Africa. In terms of climate vulnerability, Cabo Verde is extremely vulnerable to negative impacts and the unpredictability of climate. As a Sahelian small islands developing state, it has long been dealing with a hostile environment, but climate change has made climate phenomena such as droughts and coastal storms more frequent and intense in our country, increasing the risks and vulnerability. And the adaptive capacity of communities is constrained by limited and often climate-dependent livelihoods, such as rain-fed agriculture or other activities as fishing and tourism, and poor capacity to absorb disasters and geophysical shocks it faces. So Cabo Verde has registered a strong increase in the number and the variety of disasters for the last years. According to data from OSHA 2019, during the period 2008-2017, 350 disasters of different types were registered, such as floods, droughts, forest fires, between others. As evidence of the significant increase in disasters in Cabo Verde, 315 disasters were recorded only in 2018, slightly less than in a decade. The significant increase in the number of disasters appears to be related to climate change. And based on the above, on Cabo Verde experience and on the perspective of the evolution of climate vectors in the country, the most significant climate risks are loss of livelihood, built-up areas and coastal infrastructure, ecosystem service and economic stability associated with a trend of drought and consequently offshore water scarcity, storms, ocean acidification, sea level rise, extreme precipitation, and threats to the coastline in low-lying areas. For the last, despite these challenges and the worsening of vulnerabilities due to COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine, Cabo Verde has focused on strengthening the resilience of communities, productive sectors, and ecosystems. The NDG index of the University of Notre Dame indicates that although adaptation continues to be a challenge, Cabo Verde is well positioned to adapt, being in the position 72 in a list of 182 countries.
Thank you. From both of you, I've heard drought, water scarcity several times. So water seems also to be a limiting factor, isn't it? How do you manage that very precious resource on the island? How do you prioritize maybe between sectors? Because most sectors are depending on water resources. What's your strategy on that resource?
So, to improve the ability to face the growing water scarcity in our country, and to meet the needs of multiple uses. The government has defined and adopted as one of its adaptation and resilience strategy, a strong commitment to the diversification of sources of water capitation for a domestic consumption, economy, and irrigated agriculture. One of the alternatives there for the country is the bet on the desalination of seawater for public supply and brackish water for irrigation. At this moment, for example, in Cabo Verde, more than 80% of the water used for domestic consumption is desalinated water, despite its high cost, which comes essentially from the cost of the electrical energy. Another strategy is to promote the circular economy of water using treated water in agriculture. About 86% of Cabo Verdeans have access to a secure source of public water in Cabo Verde. So the strategy is functioning.
I'm very glad to have representatives of various sectors here, and now I'm looking to Rito Evra, Director of Energy, who can maybe explain like where's the energy sector right now also in the way on its transition. Energy is, beside water, another commodity which is important for all the other sectors and a crucial part for development. Where are you?
Yes, thank you. Yes, as have been mentioned by my colleagues, Cape Verde as an island state are at the front line in terms of facing the effects of climate change. And the country have since the late 70s start looking very carefully about the alternatives in terms of energy source, renewable energy source, mainly wind and solar energy. Right now we managed to put in place a very ambitious plan, a transition plan that we spent the last years developing and designing a whole set of policies and strategies that now we are more focusing on implementing what have been designed. We designed a holistic approach in terms of what we call the National Plan for Energy Sustainability, that was based in 5 axes of interventions. One related to development and to enforce the participation of renewables in the system, improving energy efficiency, but also more structural matters like the reform of the energy market, the capacity building and institutional strengthening, and also strategic investments. That means some investments that could create the right environment for a high level of penetration of renewable energy. So we are now in an implementation stage. Right now we developed a master plan that we have a step-by-step implementation. Right now we have ongoing about 40 megawatt of new projects that will be in the next 2-3 years on grid, that will allow us to achieve or even to overcome our intermediate goal of 30% renewable energy by 2025, and we will continue investing to achieve 54% of renewable energy by 2030. For this also, an important component of these projects will be storage capacities to cope with the intermittency nature of wind and solar. In this place, we are also now advancing with around 10 megawatt of new capacities for storage, battery storage, but also have made important developments with the support of the LuxDev Corporation also in developing the feasibility, the detailed feasibility study for a key project, a very structural project that is the pump storage, a 20 megawatt, 160 megawatt hour pump storage project in Santiago Island. There are other parts also that I want to mention that it's important part of this equation is our transition, the decision to implement a transition in the scope of electric mobility also, that we managed to mobilize an ABA project, and we are now in the phase of implementing these strategies also with promoting, giving incentive for early adopter of electric vehicles. We have now around 80 vehicles already on the road and 40 approved for receiving the incentives, and we are in the scope this week or next week to close the negotiation for 40 public charging infrastructure.
Rito, thanks you so much for this. We will look at what's before us in a minute. Julio Rodriguez, another sector which is maybe impacted by the effects of climate change is the health sector. Where do you stand? Do you feel as prepared as your colleague Rito Evra in the energy side?
Je comprends un peu mieux le français, donc je peux parler en français, mais ce n'est pas la grande chose. Ouais. Bon, comme vous savez, Cabo Verde c'est un petit État insulaire en développement avec beaucoup de vulnérabilité en matière de climat et sans effet dans la santé. C'est-à-dire le problème d'accès, c'est-à-dire le problème de brume sec avec la pollution atmosphérique, c'est-à-dire la occurrence d'épidémies, c'est-à-dire beaucoup de choses. Mais comment Cabo Verde fait, organise pour donner la réponse en matière pour faire face en matière de changement climatique? Cabo Verde, il y a un plan national d'adaptation de santé publique pour le changement climatique. Mais nous avons aussi un plan de gestion des déchets hospitaliers. Et ça, je parle de stratégie, je parle de matière de coordination. Par exemple, en matière de coordination, nous avons une instance nationale de coordination pour l'approche One Seule Santé, qui était coordonnée pour l'Institut national de santé publique, que je suis le membre du conseil d'administration. Mais quand nous parlons spécifiquement en matière de changement climatique et santé, et les recommandations de conférence Cabo Verde est engagé un committement qui parle de construire un système de santé résilient et de bas production de gaz à effet de serre. Qu'est-ce que nous sommes en train de faire dans ce moment? Nous avons, il fait quelque chose comme 2 mois, nous faisons un workshop où nous sommes en train de travailler une roadmap de réponses à court, moyen et long terme de ce que nous pouvons faire. Par exemple, renforcer la capacité des techniciens, renforcer la capacité de notre communication de risque, capaciter les techniciens pour atteindre les maladies qui peut-être avoir relation avec le changement climatique. Nous n'avons pas quelque chose d'extrême de température, mais il y a beaucoup de choses en matière de maladies de restriction respiratoire, par exemple, les maladies chroniques comme l'asthme et l'autre. Et ça, le système de santé doit être résilient. Par exemple, faire le lien avec la transition énergétique et les services de santé pour adapter ce qui use moins l'électricité commune. Par exemple, nous pouvons utiliser les panels solaires dans les centres de santé et qui sont très, au moins, rurales, par exemple, il y a beaucoup de choses. Mais je fais, le président peut me poser les questions pour complémenter qu'est-ce que nous sommes en train de faire. Mais ce que je peux dire est qu'il s'était très bien engagé dans le plan national d'adaptation. Et nous avons un plan spécifiquement pour le secteur santé qui était aligné avec le plan national d'adaptation. C'est ça que je peux dire. Merci.
Merci, Monsieur Rodriguez. Merci beaucoup d'avoir partagé ces impressions du secteur de la santé au Cabo Verde. Carla Semedo, Head of Resource Mobilization at the National Directorate of Planning. We have heard from your colleagues that planning and strategy is key to success and to address potential risks from climate change. In your ministry regarding to climate change, how important do you see the role of successful planning? What has been done? What are your lessons learned so far? Maybe you can tell us a bit more about the importance of that strategic planning process.
Okay. Good morning to everyone, to the audience. Yes. Good morning to everyone, to the audience, to the moderator, to my panel colleagues. Okay. I need to put more. Okay. Good morning to everyone, to the audience, to the moderator, to my panel colleagues. First of all, I would like to thank the DNA and the LuxDev for the inviting. It's a great honor to be here with you. Please allow me to consult my notes to be brief and effective in my response time. Answer to your question about main lesson learning regarding planning, governance and action, I would like to say that the issue of climate change by its effects and impacts has been seen in Cabo Verde, as my colleague said, has a sine qua non and urgent condition for ensuring the sustainable development of the country. This can be seen in terms of changing the way in which the country public policy planning is being done, especially with the adoption of the strategic government documents to achieve the international adopted targets under the Paris Agreement, the elaboration of several documents and the strategic plans have already been said by my colleagues, so there is no point in repeating, shows that currently this is a great awareness in Cabo Verde in the importance of the institutionalizing the climate governance from the planning and budgeting phase of public policies to its implementation. Speaking of the Minister of Finance and Business Development, specifically, there was a change between the previous PEDs, the Sustainable Development Strategic Plan for Sustainable Development, with the new version of PEDs, with the integration of the climate pillar. Okay, this shows the main lessons learned from the Minister of Finance perspective. This paradigm shift and the government's view of the climate change and at the decision-make stage. In order to achieve the commitments made by the country at the national level, there is the guidance that is necessary to integrate the climate change into policies, plans, and strategy from the beginning of planning and budgeting, with clear goals which allow for continuous monitoring the result achieved. Speaking of funding, I can say that the government of Cabo Verde has received public aid from our development partners like Luxembourg and other countries, loans and donations from World Bank and AFDB, some finance of climate funds like GCF, but we are aware that we need more funds to raise it, to be raised for the implementation of our plans and policies. For example, to implement the NDC, we need 2 billion of euros. So we are aware of this importance of raising more funds. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing those insights with us. Dr. Andre Weidenhaupt, Director General at the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Sustainable Development. Luxembourg has a long track record in development cooperation with Cape Verde. Maybe from a donor's perspective, what is new about or innovative about the latest indicative cooperation program? Maybe you can briefly explain us what that evolution was and how it will strengthen effective climate action from your point of view.
Thank you, Bas Prima, and also thank you very much the previous speakers. I think they have already very well outlined or given me a very good outline for my speech. Yes, Luxembourg has a very long-term tradition in official development aid with Cabo Verde, and this goes back to the 1990s, and at these years it was more focusing on health issues, education, water and sanitation, and more recently also to renewable energies. Luxembourg and Cabo Verde have hence established a long-standing, strongly diverse and trusted relationship, which led us to the decision to select Cabo Verde as the first partner country in Luxembourg cooperation development to develop our new, what we call, whole government approach. Applying such an approach will enable us to create even more synergies between the actors and actions involved in our cooperation. Over the last decade, our two countries have also formed a strategic partnership to support Cabo Verde's ambitions regarding climate action via Luxembourg's international climate finance. In this spirit, the new indicative cooperation program that goes from 2021 to 2025 seeks to strengthen the links between development, climate and energy issues, and it combines ODA and Luxembourg's international climate finance. Having these two funding sources constitutes an important novelty, and we call it always the additionality principle. At the same time, it is with Cabo Verde that climate issues enter for the first time into an indicative cooperation program of Luxembourg, with a program that is entirely dedicated to climate. The program also represents an innovation due to its structural character, as it contributes to setting up Cabo Verde's climate governance and climate action framework. With an envelope of 10 million euros, the program's overall objective consists in supporting Cabo Verde in the implementation of its ambitious climate policy as materialized by the already mentioned NDC and the National Adaptation Plan. It contributes to setting up a consolidated and inclusive climate governance, strengthening thus the climate resilience of the country and its society. In doing so, the Climate Action and Climate Governance Program also seeks to support the operationalization of the enhanced transparency framework and thus assist the country in meeting its international climate commitments as defined in the Paris Agreement.
Thank you, Andre Weidenhaupt. Ines Mourao, you are the Chief Technical Coordinator of that program that Andre Weidenhaupt just mentioned. you will be heading that very ambitious program. Maybe from your point of view and in the given context, how will that additional finance, additional climate finance trigger the needed urgent action on Cape Verde? And maybe what are the first activities of your program?
Thank you, Bas. Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. So I think that as Luxembourg did, as a pioneer, I think that Cabo Verde can still continue to be seen as a test tube. Cabo Verde has a steady democracy. It has a good governance system in place. So it has all the conditions that among the states it can be set as a leader in climate action. So I think that the country already made a great effort in defining its short-term priorities through the NDC, its implementation plan, and also an app. And so we see this climate finance as the catalyzer for all of that. And why do I say a test tube? Cabo Verde is small, okay? We are small, but we are great in the same time because of all these reasons that I've already told, and because of the technical people that we have, and we have the skills to implement climate action. So looking at this short-term needs, Carla just referred to 1,000 million, so not confusion about the billion, so 2,000 million euros that are needed until 2030, but in the short term we need more or less 20 million to implement our NAP. So I think if there is someone in the room that wants to spend some climate finance, I would really eager that this can come to Cabo Verde, because we have the conditions to spend each euro in an efficient and effective way. So this is the role, as I see it, of climate fencer, and I really appreciate Luxembourg's vision of this first program, because I'm putting it in the peak as first, because I think this can be a good example for the other ones that may come. Regarding the second question, the first activities, we see us as supporting the government in their desires, and only like their arms, they have the brain, we are the arms, and we were asked to do was to pave a way for enhanced climate implementation. So we are now focusing on climate governance. We are working with all the colleagues you see here, climate action. We have health, we have meteorology, we have environment, we have finance, we have energy, and we could have more 10 colleagues here. This is cross-sectoral, so we are working with all these sectors in paving the way for that implementation through a strengthened governance. So we are looking at a lot on capacity building. We started by doing coaching for leaderships, because we feel that we have to find champions, and we have to have this director's role is very important, because they are in the middle. They can talk up to their ministers and they can talk down to their technicians. So this was the first target. We are doing coaching for climate leadership and communication, but we are also doing other trainings, more specific. For instance, we have here the trainer that helped us to do that. We started also by preparing negotiations, climate negotiations, doing a negotiation strategy that allows us to be here today. But we are also looking forward at the future. We are looking at 2050. We are starting now to prepare our long-term low emissions development strategy. I don't know if you know, but Cabo Verde, as others that are in the room, emits 0.000% of the total emissions. We emit on average 1 ton of carbon equivalent, when the average is 5. But this doesn't mean that Cabo Verde is not ambitious. And Cabo Verde made a strong commitment through energy and through other sectors to reduce emissions. But of course, our priority is adaptation and to be more resilient. So we are also planning to to better prepare for that, and to really start looking at local action at the municipal level, at the local level, that allow us to test some interventions that we plan then to illustrate to 22 municipalities.
Thank you, Ines Morao. Just let me follow up with a question. When we meet in 3 years' time here at COP30, what will you present?
I don't know if I will be the one presenting. I think it will be Alexandre. But I hope we will be presenting, that's my ambition at least, but I think that we will be presenting a more ambitious country. Cabo Verde will have, if we manage to catalyze the financing that we need, I think we'll be really leaders among our peers. And Cabo Verde, I think, has that purpose, to be leader among other Atlantic seats, among other Pacific, among other Indian seats, demonstration what it could done so successfully in these 4 years. So I think that's it, a leader among its peers.
Alexander Nevsky, it seems your ministry is also a key partner for the climate cooperation. What do you wish to present at COP30?
Okay.
Where do you see the agricultural and the environment sector moving? What will be things that in 3 years' time you will be looking back at and present us here?
Okay, thank you. We will present, of course, a more resilient and better adapted country. This is the first. A more resilient and a better adapted country, with a better technical capacity and a better capacity to mobilize climate finance, with efficient management and planning instruments that consider climate change issue, and with empowered civil society in terms of climate change. We will also present our first BTR and our long-term low-emission development strategy here, of course. And as the agriculture sector is extremely important for the country, we envision an adapted and a resilient, sustainable agriculture with a low carbon production, base that provides quality food, more jobs and more income for rural families. Several measures are in progress, including, for example, the use of treated wastewater in agriculture, the use of desalinated brackish water, the promotion and development of short cycle and drought resilient crops, the use of renewable energy in the capture and distribution of water, among other structuring measures. And to improve planning, governance and action, it will be necessary to strengthen climate coordination and planning, bet on strengthening knowledge about the climate, implement of the early warning system, and build skills in climate diplomacy. And all these must be consolidated with a robust MRV system, and of course we will present improve in the language skills, because it's one difficulty that we have. So we need to train, we need to improve our capacity in speaking, English speaking, and we will in 2000, here from 3 years, of course, we will show you a more improvement skills in the language and be more active in the discussion, because we are more comfortable with the foreign language. And we wait in the 3 years, be able to speak to in Portuguese in the international scenarios. Okay, thank you.
Alexander Nevsky, thank you so much, and I think that are all areas on which the Luxembourg program will support you, that you will be even stronger at COP30 already next year. Rito Evra, your colleague just mentioned two strategic important commodities for Cape Verde, which is energy and water, and you touched it like slightly also the just transition that is needed in that area where we have like the nexus, water, energy, development, climate. It's almost a nexus of 4 thematic areas. Where do you see your ministry, the energy sector moving? What will you present us in 3 years?
In 2030. Okay, it's a good question. I think maybe here I will be use my other hats. So I'm here as the energy director, but we have the concern about the economy also in terms of industry and trade. And the climate change will affect the way we do everything. It's not only about energy and environment, so it's important. And for us, energy, water, I think I have been in a panel that was discussed the water energy nexus. For us, it's more rather, as Alessandro mentioned, it's energy water nexus. We have a specific program on this because energy means water in Cape Verde. We rely heavily already on desalinated water. More than 12% of our energy, electricity production goes to water desalination right now. And with the trend that we are assisting, we are seeing that gradually every island, I think we have now one single, we are 10 islands, only one don't rely on desalination to have the right amount of water for the population. So it is a key issue, but we look at renewable energy as the solution. That we understand that our evaluation is that we can succeed to mobilize more desalination water with cheaper energy coming from renewable, provided that we can solve the intermittency challenge that is related to storage. We will have more competitive price for desalinated water, and also looking at other non-conventional means of desalination. This is to extend to the other part that maybe is not climate, but energy, water, food production nexus that the Ministry of Agriculture is now starting to look very seriously. It will be part of this solution in terms of adaptations, but also we want to go beyond this. I think now we are starting really looking seriously at the hydrogen, the green hydrogen. We started this week a kick-off meeting for a feasibility study for looking at this. The water will be a key part of this. Having succeeded to mobilize cheap water, desalinated water for more production of green hydrogen, not only as a part of a solution, it can play a small role in terms of the stability of the grids in Cape Verde, but we have other alternatives that can be cheaper. But as an industrial activity, looking at it and to look at the other side from the consumer side to stimulate also economic activities related to processing this, the production of tradable goods, and to export to the EU as it is now the trend following these movements of energy transition on a global level. So this is a part of this equation, the diversification of the economy also. Since
my question, I will put it like, how will it also enhance the fairness of the transition? Energy, water, two key commodities. How does it contribute to a fairer transition, equally that each Cape Verdean will benefit from it?
Yeah, it was we are talking about a fair transition for Cape Verde. That means we need to remain competitive in terms of cost, achieve the better cost for the technology and for the energy produced, and also to internalize some of these activities, having equality in terms of opportunity for our companies internally and the young people, and gender equity in the access to the opportunity that are created and in the access to the service. This is key. The other part is that it goes beyond to be fair. I think there is a discussion here on loss and damage. That means, I think what I have been hearing in the conference is that adaptation and mitigation can solve all the things. Since as a small island country, we are at the front line. We are already bearing the costs, loss and damage that can be compensated by adaptation measures. So here is really a discussion of if the trends continue and nothing is done, we can end up in a situation where our main activities that is core for the survival of the country, like the tourism and agriculture, could be at risk. And we need to really try to look at ways to diversify our economy, having other activities, and the renewable energy and the energy transition can be a driver, the key driver of this change.
At least it's one part in the jigsaw puzzle, I would summarize it. Julio Rodriguez, in the health sector, we have heard from all your colleagues that planning, governance, action, it all works closely together. What will you present us in 3 years at COP?
En matière de gouvernance, le plus important, c'est le roadmap. Ce que nous, le ministre de Santé, un homme de gouvernement de Cabo Verde, assume que dans les prochaines étapes, c'est de faire une étude de vulnérabilité pour connaître bien les impacts du changement climatique dans le secteur santé. Mais c'est très important de faire une bonne gestion des déchets hospitaliers. C'est pour ça pour actualiser notre... Parce que le plan national d'adaptation, c'est 2012-2016, mais nous avons besoin d'actualiser ces plans-là. Mais qui va coordonner ces plans? Ces plans, c'est un plan national, ce n'est pas du secteur santé spécifiquement. Mais pour garantir l'implémentation des plans, les plans doivent être bien intégrés dans le plan national d'adaptation. Et pour ça, en matière de gouvernance, de coordination, c'est pour ça que le pays a créé l'instance nationale de coordination pour l'approche One Health Santé. Et cette instance est représentée pour le secteur santé, le secteur d'environnement et agriculture et la direction nationale de santé pour faire la réflexion de tout l'aspect du changement climatique sur le secteur santé. Ça, nous pouvons parler de beaucoup d'aspects, des maladies spécifiquement, mais de causes des maladies, ce qui c'est un tour de les maladies. Donc, je parle de coordination, c'est du ministère de la Santé assurer clairement ce que c'est les problèmes liés à la secteur santé et au changement climatique. Et moi, je peux assurer ici que notre commitment c'est clair. Et le roadmap, le feuille de route était presque fini, avec les domaines très définis, avec les groupes de travail que nous sommes un comité multisectoriel pour engager. L'engagement, c'est assuré. Je parle d'implémentation. Nous sommes là pour parler dans ce moment d'implémentation. Et pour implémenter quelque chose, il doit être capacité renforcée, il doit être condition d'implémentation. Ça demande des ressources aussi. OK? Merci.
Merci pour cette analyse. Turning back to Carla Semedo, we have heard from many of the colleagues that planning and sectoral plans are key to success. Your ministry is playing a central role in all that. What will you present at COP30? Giving yourself 3 years of time, what are your expectations looking ahead?
Okay. First, in terms of what we need what needs to be done, and the main challenge, I want to point out a few aspects, okay, very quickly. It's necessary to institutionalize climate governance at national and local level in all sectors and all municipalities, with a special focus on the vulnerable groups in terms of the access to the climate alerts, and the implementation of the education policies and public awareness of the climate change. Another aspect, its importance, the international recognition of the special seeds conditions that limit the capacity to take action in the face of climate change. Another aspect is the importance of increased support in capacity building, technological transfer and finance. It's important also to improving access to the concessional climate finance due to the debt issue and the vulnerabilities of the seeds, small islands countries and African countries, including supporting the implementation of the national adaptation plans. In terms of the planning and budgeting, the big challenge is to put the various strategic plans into practice, avoiding the effort duplication through coordinated action between the different sectors of the country. Looking ahead, in the future, I would like to see Cabo Verde with greater resilience and in terms of climate change, a country with a diversified economy, like my colleague Rito said, the achievement of the vision of the strategic of the Minister of Finance and Business Development with diversification of the Cape Verdean economy to reduce the vulnerability and create resilience country, especially through the energy transition, the development of the blue economy with more equitable water access, the digital economy, industry, the transformation of the agriculture, and the increase in the added value of the tourism industry. That's my vision to 2030. Thank you.
We hear a lot of motivation and willingness to action. Looking at André Weidenhaupt, who has a long track record and experience in attending COPs and international events, what are maybe the factors that guarantee success in translating these various sectoral plans of which we heard, like to transform them into concrete climate action? What recommendations would you give to our Cape Verdean colleagues today? Is there any lessons learned that you can share with us?
Yeah, or they give us recommendations. That's the other way around. It's not always on us to give recommendations. Anyway, yes, I have been attending some COPs. I think this is the 8th COP that I attend. The usual mood. Monday, second week, nothing seems to be agreed and so on. But I do not stick on the COP because I think we will come to an end if we all stick together. I would say there are a couple of elements that are crucial, and they would could also be applicable more and more for the way how COPs do function. But I go back to Luxembourg because I think Luxembourg and Cabo Verde have two important elements in common. It's two countries that have comparable scales, and I think there's several components on how to be successful when it comes to climate action on the ground that are more easily applicable when you are at a smaller scale. And I will elaborate a few of them, and I think my list is not exhaustive, but anyway. So first, and I think that's a very important component, and that's also linked to what you addressed further as a question to Rito, the question on justness in the transition. I think very important is inclusiveness. We need to have everyone on board, and we need to give everyone a say. And I think then it is a key factor for successful climate action. And I come with 2 examples in this respect right now, because I think climate action can only be effective when all parts of society are both aware of the challenges, so education and all action that is made for empowerment, and tomorrow is ACE Day, I think that's very important. So having everyone aware of the climate crisis at all levels, that's important, but also to be an effective agent to bring climate action at an implementation stage at all levels. I think both is important. So we need to have educated citizens, and we need to make sure that citizens act collectively. I think, and so include everyone. And I think it's so much easier if we are small than if we are at a COP with 198 parties. So I think this recipe is easier to translate to both Luxembourg and Cabo Verde. But anyway, the small ones also sometimes need to be great. And I think we are great because we have more abilities to include people. And I have 2 examples for that in Luxembourg. A very recent one, our Prime Minister last year launched what he called Klimabiergerråd. So that's basically a citizens' assembly on the climate. So he made a call, public call, to every either inhabitant or resident of Luxembourg, be it a Luxembourg or not. You know, we have a lot non-Luxembourgers. And it was limited to 100, so it was somehow first come, first served, but it was also made sure that we had a very broad representativeness of the public. And then these 100 people started early 2022 in workshops that were, a couple of workshops, all were over the weekend. They were a little bit helped to get through the different pillars of climate action in Luxembourg. So that was for agriculture, for energy, for buildings, for transport, for waste management, and also more horizontal measures. So they were put together and they developed recommendations. So because we have a national, and that's another important ingredient, I will come back to that as well, we have a national climate and energy plan, and this will be redrafted this year. And so all these citizens made 56 recommendations, and we are currently analyzing them. They were also presented in a public debate to Parliament. They were presented to the government, and we are currently analyzing them to take those that can be taken on board easily in the National Energy and Climate Plan on board of this, but there are also recommendations that touch upon adaptation, so they would be easier being taken on board in the adaptation plan. There are measurements that tackle agriculture, that tackle nature conservation, so they will be taken on board in these plans. So I think that's very good to have people, give people a say. I think that's important, and you need to be very attentive and in a listening mode. So I think that's my first example. My second one is a little bit a more institutionalized one. That's our so-called climate pact with the municipalities. We are now on stage 2 with the climate pact. So we have, in Luxembourg, we have 102 municipalities. For the second stage of the climate pact, 100, it's a voluntary adherence to the climate pact, but as soon as you are in, you come with mandatory measures. So it's tricky. But we have 101 out of the 102 that have joined right now. And the last to join will join soon, but that is more institutional issue. they are merging with another municipality. So they would wait for the merger because the other municipality has already joined in. So basically we have all on board. And this is also action at a local stage. And I think that's very important. And the second part of our climate pact has been enlarged also to adaptation, because the first one was basically focusing on mitigation, second one now focuses on adaptation. Then I think a very important component of successful climate action is a good governance. Luxembourg, as has the European Union, has a climate law. The climate law fixes clear goals. It fixes also the governance, the way how different bodies are consulted, and it gives also the legal basis for a national energy and climate plan. And I think that's also very important, to have a very strong governance. And I think you're in a very good way right now with our common cooperation. And then last not least, coherence. You need to have your figures right. You need to have good plans that address all issues. I think the colleagues, Alexander, Rito, all the others have mentioned the different components, and I think it's very important to have coherent plans, and that should also follow common objectives. And I think again this is much easier at a small scale. So I think small scale gives a good starting point for good climate policy.
Thank you, André Weidenhaupt. And you were hesitant to share valuable insights that were numerous, and I think we hope that Cape Verde can integrate several of them at the right point in time with the right support that they will receive. Maybe just a closing word from Esther Brito on her outlook on this from the scientific side, meteorologic, climate data, the future of Cape Verde. What do you see? How do you interpret it? And then we will close on a very positive note.
Thank you, Bas. You are sure that without scientific information, without climate information, all the plans, all the strategy we are here talking about, if they are not scientific supported, maybe all the adaptation and different measure will not have the result we want. So Cape Verde are working in improving the weather service, and we hope in the next times we will have climate service and climate information for different sectors of economy, and all the information and data that will help more in planning and to introduce climate change in all strategic planning. That my last word is: without science, we can go to some wrong direction. So we have to work with science, and INMG, our meteorological institute, is working to support all the different plans in Cape Verde. In the future, we hope to have a good adaptation plan and measure to face climate change. Thank you.
Esther Brito, thank you so much. Thank you too much to all of you. I think we have seen what it requires for an effective resilience building of Cape Verde. In every sector we need planning, governance, concrete actions. And as André said, gender, youth, capacity building, all that has to play together for an effective action. It has to be inclusive, and we have to take everyone on board. I thank all my panelists here for the very wise insights that they provided to us today. I think we still have another 5 to 10 minutes if anyone from the floor wants to ask a question, or if there is any participation from those who follow us online. You can send in, I think, your questions. Otherwise, the floor is yours, and I thank you already now for your participation. I don't see any hands up at the moment. That means everything was clear. We thank you for your patience and interest in these sessions. Wishing you a successful second week of the COP. Bye.